The entire office went still the moment the Korean executive pulled the African woman toward him, lowering his lips to hers in a deliberate, measured kiss that crackled like static in the air. It wasn't passion, not quite, but a message, sharp as a blade, aimed at the woman who once fractured his heart into pieces he never let anyone touch again. Yet later that night, as that same African woman stood beneath shimmering lights, speaking near-perfect Korean before an audience that expected her to crumble, everything in the room seemed to shift. And the words he whispered to her in the darkness afterward would rewrite everything she believed about where she belonged. Simisola Adeyemi had dreamed of South Korea long before she ever figured out how to explain it to people. Her friends said she was obsessed, but to her, it felt like destiny, like some invisible string tugged her heart thousands of miles from Lagos to a city she only knew from screens and songs. Her bedroom was more than decoration. It was a small North Star. Sticky notes covered with Hangul she practiced every morning, drama OSTs playing softly as she got ready for school, posters from shows she could quote line for line. She spoke to them like they were promises. One day, she told herself, I will see all of this with my own eyes. But dreams like that sounded ridiculous when money was tight and expectations heavy. So when a late-night scroll on her phone showed a recruitment ad, TechBridge Seoul seeking junior international programmers, she applied without thinking. It felt like tossing a bottle into the ocean. For weeks later, that same phone buzzed while she was cooking noodles. The notification nearly made her drop the pot. Congratulations! You have been accepted into the TechBridge Seoul Immersion Program. Travel arrangements covered. Her scream startled even her neighbors. She laughed, then cried, then laughed again, spinning in her small kitchen until she knocked over the seasoning container. For the next 7 days, she barely touched the ground. Every moment felt like stepping into the life she'd wished for more than she'd ever admitted aloud. Landing at Incheon felt like entering a movie. The air was colder than she expected, biting at her cheeks. People rushed past in padded jackets, announcements echoed overhead, lights glowed in soft blues and whites. Everything smelled of roasted chestnuts and coffee. She bundled her coat tighter and took it all in like someone afraid to blink. Her tiny studio in Mapo was the kind of place she'd once saved photos of online. Floor heating that warmed her toes, a small balcony overlooking neon signs, the hum of buses passing below at odd hours. She whispered, "Thank you," to no one and everyone at once. Her first day at Hanjin Corporation rattled her nerves. She spent the train ride rehearsing her introduction in the clearest Korean she could manage. When she stepped through the revolving doors of the skyscraper, the scent of polished steel and faint cologne greeted her. People glanced up, some curious, some surprised, some simply trying to figure out who she was. She wondered if it was her accent, her braids, or simply the fact that she stood out in this river of dark suits. A man in crisp gray approached her. His glasses had thin rims and his expression was clean, unreadable. "Good morning. I am Min Jae, the director's assistant. He wants to see you." Her heartbeat stumbled. She wasn't prepared to meet anyone important yet. She followed him through quiet hallways lined with glass offices until he stopped at a door with a frosted design. Inside sat a man whose presence seemed to alter the oxygen in the room. Director Han Jinho. Stark jawline, sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal the veins in his forearms, eyes sharp beneath heavy lashes. He didn't smile. He didn't even stand. He simply looked at her like she was a puzzle he'd been asked to solve before lunch. "Sit," he said, voice calm, clipped. "You'll report directly to me." That was it. No welcome, no smile, nothing. But there was something in the way he held her gaze, something watchful, assessing, curious in a way he would never admit. She grew into her role faster than anyone expected. She stayed longer hours, asked thoughtful questions, and learned the rhythms of the office. Some co-workers warmed to her. Some stayed distant. But even those who doubted her at first slowly began to echo her name with respect. She cracked jokes at company dinners in broken Korean that earned laughter, not mockery. She brought plantains one day, teaching curious colleagues how to eat them. Her world was expanding, piece by piece. Director Han, however, remained a ghost in her orbit, present but far. He rarely spoke to her unless it was work-related. But she noticed how his eyes lingered whenever she presented. She noticed the way he corrected others softly when they underestimated her. He never made a show of it. He simply saw her. 8 months later, everything fractured in one afternoon. Her previous co-worker had whispered warnings before. You know she used to be close to him, right? But Simisola never cared enough to pry. Office gossip wasn't her thing. She just wanted to work. Then she saw the woman in burgundy stilettos striding through the lobby like she owned the building. Yuna. Stunning, poised, hair flowing in a perfect wave as though a stylist hovered behind her at all times. Her expression froze the moment she spotted Simisola, curiosity flickering, then something like annoyance. She brushed past with the faintest smirk. Minutes later, Simisola found herself called to Director Han's office with a stack of documents. As she approached, raised voices leaked through the door. Jinho, you can't still be holding on to that, Yuna said, her tone silky but sharp. You left, he replied. His voice was controlled, but something underneath trembled. And my life did not stop. Do you hate me that much? I don't think about you enough to hate you. Simisola froze in the hallway, unsure whether she should knock or run. Just then, Min-jae nudged her. Go in. She stepped inside, head bowed respectfully. Director, these documents. Yuna's eyes sliced into her. You may go, she snapped. Before Simisola could obey, Director Han spoke. Stay. Yuna blinked, stunned. The room tilted. Director Han rose from behind his desk and walked towards Simisola. She barely had time to register the tension thickening the air before he reached for her hand. Then, without hesitation, he pressed his lips to hers. Gasps erupted outside. Even the clock on the wall seemed to stop ticking. It wasn't a tender kiss, not really, but it wasn't empty either. It felt intentional, meaningful, sharp. Yuna's face drained of color, then flushed with fury. She stormed out so fast her heels echoed like gunshots. The door slammed. Simisola stayed frozen. Her breath trembled. Director Han. He stepped back, expression unreadable again, like a mask sliding into place. Do not involve yourself in matters beyond your role. She stared at him, shock cracking through her chest. You used me. You misunderstand. He turned away. Return to your tasks. But she saw it, just for a second, a flicker of regret, or something close to it, tugging at the corner of his mouth. 4 days, she avoided him. And he let her. But the air between them wasn't the same. Something had been exposed, even if neither of them dared name it. When the invitation to the Elite Circle Gala arrived, a night for Seoul's top executives and their teams, everyone expected Director Han to attend with Yuna, as they always had in the past. She even suggested it, smiling too brightly. He refused. Instead, he called Simisola into his office. She stood stiffly, still hurt, still confused. I need a companion for the gala, he said. I want you to come. She blinked. Director, why me? Because you don't crumble under pressure, he said. And because I trust you not to embarrass me. She scoffed softly. That's your reason? He hesitated, something he never did. I will compensate you, he added. She could have said no. Should have said no. But a small, reckless part of her whispered yes before she could reason it away. I'll go, she said quietly. The night of the gala, she barely recognized herself. Her dress shimmered like moonlight, and her braids were styled into an elegant crown. When she stepped into the lobby, Director Han stalled mid-step. His eyes softened, truly softened, for the first time. You look She raised an eyebrow. Incredible. He offered his arm. She took it. Cameras flashed as they descended the marble steps. Heads turned. People whispered. And for the first time since she'd arrived in Korea, Simisola didn't shrink. The moment they stepped into the gala hall, the atmosphere wrapped around them like warm velvet. Crystal chandeliers dripped light over clusters of influential figures, and the murmur of conversations rose and fell in polished waves. Simisola held her chin high, eyes taking in the sophistication, the rich fabrics, the confident laughter. She felt his hand rest lightly on the small of her back as they walked deeper inside. It was a simple gesture, yet it steadied her more than she wanted to admit. Director Han greeted people with nods and brief handshakes, but every so often, he glanced her way, as though reassuring himself she was still beside him. She matched his pace, trying to ignore the curious eyes that tracked her. Some looked intrigued, others confused, some even borderline disapproving. But she refused to shrink, reminding herself that she belonged in every room she walked into. They paused near a cluster of executives. One of them, a tall man with silver-framed glasses, smiled politely. "Director Han, good to see you." "And your guest?" "Simisola," Director Han said, voice calm. "My associate from Hanjin's development team." Her heart clenched at the word associate. Not assistant. Not employee. Associate. Equal footing. She offered a small bow. "Nice to meet you." The man blinked in surprise at her smooth Korean but nodded back, impressed. A few others exchanged greetings with her as well, though some stared too long, as if trying to understand what she was doing there. Then the temperature in the room shifted. Yuna arrived, wrapped in a deep emerald gown that clung perfectly to her frame. Her hair cascaded like silk, her steps measured with the confidence of someone who had once owned this social world. Conversations paused as she passed. Even the air seemed to hum around her. She spotted them immediately. Her smile wavered for the tiniest moment before she smoothed it into something sharp and sweet. She approached, heels tapping softly on the polished floor. "Jinho, you look well." Her eyes slid to Simisola. "And you brought company." Director Han's hand subtly tightened around Simisola's waist. "I came with my associate," he said. Yuna's eyebrow lifted. "Is that what we're calling it now?" Before either of them could respond, another executive approached Director Han, pulling him into a conversation. Simisola found herself momentarily alone with Yuna, who studied her like a scientist examining an unexpected specimen. "So," Yuna said, swirling her drink, "you're the new face in the office, right? The one he's close to these days." Simisola didn't take the bait. "I work hard. That's all." Yuna laughed lightly. "You're bold. I'll give you that. But don't mistake standing beside him tonight for something permanent. Jinho has a way of keeping people at arm's length." Simisola met her gaze with steady calm. "If he wants someone beside him, that's his decision. Not yours." Yuna's smile tightened. "Confidence is cute. Let's see how long it lasts." The next few minutes felt like walking across thin ice. Yuna lingered close enough to be intimidating, yet far enough to pretend she was simply enjoying the evening. Simisola exhaled slowly, refusing to let the woman rattle her. She had worked too hard, traveled too far, to let anyone make her feel small. Director Han returned, his expression subtly shifting when he noticed Yuna's proximity. He stepped between them with quiet precision. "Simisola, come with me." She followed him gratefully, though her pulse still thumped in her ears. They moved toward the stage area, where people were beginning to gather for the keynote speech. Director Han would address the room, and she knew it was a significant moment for him. He stopped at the base of the steps, turning to her. His voice lowered. "Are you all right?" She forced a small smile. "I'm fine." His eyes searched hers, not convinced. If she said something. She didn't say anything I can't handle. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I expected as much. The host called his name, and he stepped onto the stage to polite applause. He carried himself with crisp authority, his presence commanding yet elegant. Simisola watched, proud despite herself. He spoke about innovation, global collaboration, and the future of their industry. But every now and then, as he glanced across the crowd, his eyes found hers. Yuna stood near the front, arms folded, gaze narrowing at each subtle exchange. When Director Han finished his speech, the applause rose warmly. He descended the steps, only to be intercepted by a group of executives wanting photos. Simisola stepped aside, intending to blend into the crowd for a moment, but a hand wrapped around her wrist. Yuna! Come with me, Yuna said, pulling her toward a quieter corner of the hall. If we're going to do this dance, let's at least be honest with each other. Simisola pulled her hand free. What do you want from me? Clarity, Yuna said, tilting her head. Do you actually think you're the kind of woman who can stand at his side in front of people like this? These rooms are not built for people like you. Simisola's breath caught, more from the audacity than the cruelty. Maybe they weren't built for me, she said softly. But I'm in them anyway. Yuna opened her mouth, but before she could respond, someone tapped a microphone on stage. The host announced a brief segment where representatives from partner companies would come forward to share remarks. The lineup shifted unexpectedly. Someone called out in accented Korean, "We should hear from the international team as well. Hanjin brought new global talent tonight, didn't they?" A murmur spread. Director Han turned sharply, scanning the hall until his gaze landed on Simisola. She stiffened. No. No, no, no. She wasn't ready for this. She hadn't planned anything. Her throat dried. The host smiled enthusiastically. Hanjin's international associate, Simisola, please join us. The crowd looked around, searching for her. Yuna's lips curved into a satisfied smirk. Perfect timing, she whispered. Simisola's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She couldn't move. She felt the walls tilt, the lights blur. Then she saw Director Han, walking straight toward her, gaze locked on hers. He stopped right in front of her. You can do this, he said quietly. Her breath shook. I didn't prepare anything. You don't need a script, he said. Just be yourself. That has always been enough. For a moment, the room dissolved around them, leaving only the two of them in a fragile, suspended world. She could hear her own pulse, his steady breath, the hum of expectation. Then she nodded. He offered his hand. She took it. Together they walked toward the stage. Whispers followed them like a trail of sparks. At the steps, she released his hand and drew in a trembling breath. She climbed slowly, each step a battle against her fear. When she turned to face the audience, hundreds of eyes stared back. She swallowed hard. Then she began to speak. Her Korean wasn't perfect, but it was warm and clear, like a melody carried by courage rather than confidence. She spoke about her journey, about believing you could build a life far from home, about the power of diversity and the beauty of connecting cultures. Each word stitched itself into the air, steadying her voice as she went on. The hall fell silent, not out of pity, but from genuine attention. People leaned in. Some smiled. Even the executives who once looked puzzled now listened with quiet respect. Simisola lifted her chin slightly. She could feel something rising in her chest, not pride, but a sense of belonging she had waited years to feel. When she finished, the silence broke into applause. Loud, sincere applause. She blinked rapidly, overwhelmed. Someone cheered. Someone else shouted, "Day back!" Yuna stood frozen, expression unreadable. Simisola stepped off the stage on shaky legs, and the first thing she saw was Director Han waiting for her at the bottom. He looked at her like she had just rearranged the stars. She walked into his embrace without thinking. He didn't hesitate. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close in front of the entire room. It wasn't a dramatic kiss this time. It was quieter, deeper, a moment suspended in warmth and pride, and something else neither of them dared to name yet. Cameras flashed. Whispers rose. But Simisola didn't care. For the first time since she arrived in Seoul, she felt undeniably, powerfully seen. The rest of the gala felt like drifting through a dream she wasn't quite ready to wake from. People approached her, executives, team leaders, even younger staff, each offering congratulations or polite nods of admiration. Some asked how long she'd been studying Korean. Others complimented her courage. A few looked stunned, as if they were recalibrating their entire opinion of her. She thanked them all quietly, palms still tingling from the applause, her heartbeat still fluttering from the moment on the stage. But through it all, Director Han stayed close. Not possessive, not overbearing, just present. A silent anchor in a sea of new attention. Every so often, their eyes met, and he offered a small nod, as if reminding her she had done well. More than well. Yuna watched from across the room, her expression unreadable, the corners of her mouth twitching with something that might have been jealousy or realization. Eventually, she slipped away, disappearing through a side door without looking back. If she expected Director Han to chase her, she was disappointed. When the gala finally wound down, the hall emptied slowly. Waiters carried away trays of half-finished champagne glasses and flickering candles. Soft music faded into silence. Director Han walked Simisola toward the exit, their footsteps echoing across the polished marble floor. Outside, the night air was cool and crisp. Streetlights glowed softly along the pavement. Chauffeurs waited by parked cars, engines humming. She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, the excitement of the night settling into a warm hum beneath her ribs. "Thank you," she murmured, "for believing in me up there." He shook his head. "I didn't believe in you because of the speech. I believed in you before that." Her breath caught. "Why?" "Because you never pretend," he said simply. "You show up as yourself. Most people don't know how to do that." She wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she stared at the street instead, watching a breeze scatter a few leaves across the pavement. He opened the car door for her, and she slipped inside. The ride back to Mapo was quiet but comfortable. City lights blurred past the windows, neon hues blending into soft streaks. She could feel his gaze flicker to her occasionally, as though checking if she was cold or tired or overwhelmed. When the car stopped in front of her apartment building, she hesitated before stepping out. "Good night, Director Han." He leaned slightly closer, his voice low. "Jinho. When we're not in the office, you can call me Jinho." Her pulse skipped. "Good night, Jinho." He didn't smile, not fully, but the hint of one tugged at the corner of his lips before the car pulled away. The next few days at work were a whirlwind. The entire office buzzed with retellings of the gala. People replayed footage from social media clips, praising her Korean, her poise, her speech. Even those who had been distant now greeted her with nods or warm smiles. But something else had shifted too, something she noticed even before she walked into the building. Director Han was different. Softer in his glances, quieter in his instructions, more attuned to her presence. He didn't hover, but he noticed her in ways he never had before. And everyone else noticed him noticing. Co-workers whispered when he lingered near her desk, asking about a project or offering feedback. Min-jae raised an eyebrow more than once, as if silently documenting changes in the atmosphere. Even the cleaning staff exchanged knowing glances. Simisola tried to ignore it all and focus on her tasks. But every time she felt his gaze cross paths with hers, she felt a flutter of something new, something unsteady. One Friday evening, the office organized a rooftop gathering to celebrate a completed project. Lanterns glowed softly along the edges of the building. Music played from a portable speaker. Someone brought drinks. Someone else brought small snacks from a bakery downstairs. People chatted in small clusters, enjoying the warm breeze. Simisola didn't plan to stay long, but her teammates insisted she join them. They talked about everything: food, travel, the cold, the funniest mistakes they made learning English. She laughed until her sides hurt. Director Han arrived late, dressed more casually than she had ever seen him. Dark slacks, rolled-up sleeves, hair slightly tousled. The rooftop chatter slowed when he walked in, but he simply nodded politely and moved toward the drinks table. Simisola looked away quickly, pretending to listen to her teammate explain the difference between two types of sweet rice cakes. But she felt his presence the way one feels a change in temperature. Eventually, people began leaving in pairs and groups, heading toward the elevator with cheerful goodbyes. She stayed until only a few remained, then gathered her things and started down the stairs toward the parking lot level, planning to catch a taxi. She didn't expect footsteps behind her, but she recognized them instantly. "Are you heading home?" His voice was quieter than usual, softer, without the sharp edges it carried during the day. She turned. "Yes. The buses aren't running often at this hour, so I'll get a taxi." "I'll give you a ride," he said. She blinked. "Director Jinho," he corrected, his gaze steady. Outside the office. Her heart thudded. She hesitated. "You've had a drink. You shouldn't drive." "One," he said. "Barely finished half. I'm fine." She wasn't sure whether he was trying to reassure her or himself. Still, she followed him to the car, a sleek black sedan parked near the exit. The inside smelled faintly of pine and something warm she couldn't identify. The drive was quieter than she expected. He loosened his tie by a fraction, resting one hand on the steering wheel. His posture looked relaxed, but there was something distant in his eyes, something he seemed to be wrestling with. They stopped at a red light, and he sighed, long and slow. "Simisola," he said, her name almost a whisper. "There's something I need to say." She turned slightly toward him. "What is it?" He didn't answer immediately. The light turned green, and the car rolled forward again. He exhaled, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "I've tried to ignore it," he said quietly. "For months. I thought if I kept things professional, it would fade." Her pulse quickened. "But it hasn't." She swallowed. "Fade." His jaw tightened. "My feelings." The words hung between them, fragile and heavy at the same time. "I know it's reckless," he continued softly. "I know the complications. I know what people would say. And I know I shouldn't let myself." His voice cracked for the first time since she had known him. "But I can't pretend anymore." The car stopped in front of her apartment building. Streetlights reflected off the windshield, casting faint shadows across his face. He looked tired, not from work, but from holding something in for too long. "Simisola," he murmured, "I'm in love with you." Her breath caught in her chest. He finally turned toward her, eyes soft and vulnerable in a way she had never seen. "I don't need an answer now. I just needed you to know. If you don't feel the same, I will find a way to step back." She stared at him, heart pounding, every memory of the past months flickering through her mind like a reel. His quiet support, his lingering glances, the way he believed in her at the gala, the warmth in his voice when he said her name. Then she leaned closer. "I feel it too," she whispered. His eyes widened slightly, just for a moment, before relief washed over him like a tide. He reached for her hand hesitantly, as though afraid she might pull away. She didn't. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to change her mind. She didn't move, not away, anyway. Their lips met in a gentle, tentative kiss filled with all the words neither had dared say before. A soft breath escaped against her cheek. The warmth of him pressed through every part of her. It wasn't the sharp, deliberate kiss from the office. It was real. When they finally pulled apart, dawn was beginning to creep over the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of blue and gold. They sat in silence, holding on to the moment. And for the first time, it felt like the world had shifted, not against them, but toward something neither expected. Simbi drove through the quiet streets of Seoul, her hands steady on the wheel despite the storm inside her chest. The city glowed around them, soft blue lights from convenience stores, pink neon drifting across the pavement, the hum of late-night buses passing in the distance. Beside her, Director Han leaned back in the seat, his breath slow but not drunken, just tired, like someone who'd been holding himself together for too long. He hadn't spoken since the rooftop party ended. Not a word. Not a sigh. Only the way he kept staring out the window, jaw tense, as if wrestling with something he'd run out of strength to hide. When they reached his building, the car rolled to a gentle stop. Simbi unclipped her seatbelt and gave him a polite nod. "We're here, sir. I can call someone too." His hand closed around her wrist, firm but trembling slightly. She froze. "Don't go." The words were soft, cracked at the edges, nothing like the well-composed director who commanded entire boardrooms with a glance. Simbi turned slowly, and there it was, the truth he could no longer bury. His eyes, usually so unreadable, were filled with a raw vulnerability she had never seen in him. She whispered his name, but he shook his head as though he couldn't let her speak first. "I don't know how long I've been fighting this," he murmured. "I told myself it was nothing, that it would pass, that it was inconvenience, distraction, foolishness." He let out a breath that sounded like surrender. "But it isn't. It's you. It's been you for a long time." Simbi's pulse hammered in her ears. She didn't move, didn't breathe. His thumb brushed her wrist lightly, almost reverently. "I know I shouldn't complicate your life," he said. "And I know I should be stronger than this. But whenever I try to distance myself, I fail. I see you, and everything quiets. Everything makes sense." A shaky laugh escaped him, not amusement, but disbelief that he'd let himself say the words. "I thought it was admiration at first, then respect, then gratitude. But none of those explained why I waited for your footsteps in the hall, or why a day feels wrong if I don't hear your voice at least once." His voice deepened, barely above a whisper. "Simbi, I'm in love with you." The car felt too small for the enormity of his confession, too silent for the pounding of her heart. She opened her mouth, but he continued, as though afraid she'd misunderstand. "I'm not asking for something temporary," he said. "I'm asking if you'll let me be sincere with you. If you'll let me try. If you'll give us a chance." Simbi's breath caught. She'd imagined many possibilities for how her life in Korea might unfold, but never this. Never the cold, unreachable director unraveling before her like this, offering her something so fragile, so human, so real. She leaned closer, her voice barely audible. "Yes." His eyes widened, just slightly, the shock flickering across his features before warmth replaced it, slow, deep, consuming. He cupped her face with both hands, and his forehead rested against hers, as though he needed the closeness to confirm she wasn't a dream. "Say it again," he whispered. "Yes," she repeated, steady this time. "I want this too." The kiss that followed wasn't rushed or demanding. It wasn't like the kiss he'd given her in front of Yuna, sharp and calculated. This one was soft, intentional, full of the emotion he'd been suffocating for months. His lips brushed hers gently, then deeper, pulling her into a moment that felt suspended from reality. When they finally parted, his hand still lingered at her cheek, tracing her skin as if memorizing it. A faint smile tugged at his lips, a smile she'd never seen him give anyone. "Come upstairs," he said quietly, not as an order but an invitation she felt down to her bones. They walked together through the lobby, his hand brushing hers every few seconds, unable to disconnect completely. When they reached his apartment, he unlocked the door and let her step inside first. The space was sleek, modern, warm, yet somehow lonely, as though he'd lived there without ever really letting anyone in. He placed his jacket on the sofa and turned to her. "I didn't plan tonight. I didn't plan any of this," he admitted. "But I meant every word." Simbi set her purse down, her eyes soft. "I know. They talked. Really talked. About work. About pressure. About the fear of missteps. About the rumors that would inevitably spread." He told her about the heartbreak Yuna left him with, not to compare, not to evoke pity, but to explain the walls he'd built and why letting her in felt terrifying. She told him about her dreams, the sacrifices she'd made to get to Korea, the loneliness she pretended not to feel. For the first time, she saw his gentle humor, his dry wit, the warmth hidden beneath his rigid professionalism. He saw her quiet strength, her loyalty, her fierce heart. As dawn slowly painted the sky in pale colors, they found themselves curled together on the sofa, fatigue pulling at their eyelids. The city was still waking up when Simbi's head rested against his shoulder, and he pressed a light kiss to her temple. "Stay," he whispered. And she did. The next morning, the office buzzed before they even walked through the door. The Gala performance had gone viral overnight. Clips of Simbi speaking flawless Korean on stage were circulating everywhere. People quoted her lines, praised her confidence, debated her boldness. She had become, almost instantly, a name people wanted to know. And Director Han. He wasn't subtle anymore. Not in the way he paused to listen when she spoke. Not in the way he glanced at her during meetings, quick, but unmistakably full of something deeper. The staff exchanged looks, whispering theories behind their monitors. Some admired it. Some judged. Some simply watched. But Simbi didn't shrink. She walked through the office with her head high, her heart full, her steps steady. She'd earned her place here, not because of him, but because of her own dedication, her own brilliance, her own resilience. Still, the shift between them couldn't be ignored for long. One Thursday afternoon, during a break, she overheard two co-workers talking near the elevator. "She thinks she's special now. Because the director looks at her? Please. Yuna will crush her." Simbi stepped into the elevator before they noticed her listening. The doors closed, sealing away their words, but not the sting. That evening, Director Han found her reviewing code alone in a conference room. "You're quiet today," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "It's nothing," she replied, but he knew better. He approached her, lowering his voice. "Tell me." Simbi hesitated, then sighed. "People talk." "They always do," he said simply. "They think I'm here because of you. You're here because you earned it." He spoke without hesitation. "And anyone who disagrees is blind." Her chest tightened at the certainty in his tone. He wasn't defending her because of emotions. He meant it. Truly. He stepped closer, his hand brushing hers on the table. "Simbi," he murmured, "you don't have to hide from the world. Not anymore." She looked up at him, and there it was again, that feeling that every fear loosened its grip when he was near. Their relationship deepened in quiet moments, coffee breaks shared at the far corner table where no one bothered them, long dinners after work where he actually laughed, walks through Mapo's night markets where he asked about her childhood and listened like every detail mattered. Simbi watched him soften bit by bit, his guarded heart slowly opening. Their worlds were different. Their cultures, their pasts, their fears. None of them matched neatly. But what they felt was undeniable. One night, months later, as spring blossomed across Seoul, Simbi stood on a bridge overlooking the Han River. She wasn't Simbi who arrived alone at Incheon Airport anymore. She wasn't just the foreign programmer who whispered Korean practice lines to herself each morning. She was a woman loved fiercely and honestly, a woman who had carved her place in a world that once felt unreachable. Director Han wrapped his arms around her from behind, his voice warm against her ear. If I could rewrite everything, he murmured, I'd still choose the moment you walked into my office. Simbi smiled, leaning back against him. And I'd still choose the moment you asked me to stay. Below them, the river shimmered. Above them, the city buzzed. Around them, life continued. But in that moment, it felt like the world belonged only to them. If this story swept you away, tell me, was it Simbi's bold courage or Director Han's quiet confession that stole your heart the most? Share your thoughts in the comments, hit the like button, and subscribe for more unforgettable Afro-Korean love stories.